Please be seated.
The Casino Royal Commission is now in session.
We are sitting today to commence public hearings of evidence in the Perth Casino Royal Commission. I'm going to call on Ms Carl, Senior Counsel assisting the Commission, to make an opening statement. Before I do so, I wish to make some comments on behalf of the three Commissioners that are intended to inform the public about the progress of the inquiry to date and what to expect in the coming days, weeks and months. Some of this will be a repeat of remarks we made in the open sessions on the 12th and the 20th of April. The terms of reference direct us to inquire into and report on two broad areas. The first area is directed at the regulation of the casino in Western Australia under various pieces of legislation, and in particular, the capability and effectiveness of the Gaming and Wagering Commission in discharging its regulatory functions, and of the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries in supporting the GWC, and how the regulatory framework for casinos enshrined in the legislation fits with contemporary norms and best practice, and, if there are deficiencies, what changes to the statutory regime should be made to bring it in line with those standards. The second broad area concerns the licensee of the Perth Casino, in particular, whether the licensee of the Crown Perth Casino is a suitable person to hold the casino licence, and whether nominated close associates are suitable persons to be concerned in the operations of the casino. And if the answer to that question is, in relation to any relevant corporate entity, no, in respect of identified deficiencies, whether there are remedial measures which, if implemented, could render it a suitable person. The two broad areas are separate, but at the same time closely connected. We are required to submit an interim report on aspects of the regulatory issues that the Commission considers appropriate by the 30th of June this year, and a final report and recommendations on all issues by the 14th of November this year. Given the realities of that program, we will be concentrating in these early sessions on the first of those two broad areas, namely the regulatory questions. While there's likely to be some crossover, we will defer consideration of the substantive issues relating to the suitability questions until after the interim report has been completed. In the past 3 weeks, the Commission has received from parties, in response to notices to produce relating to the regulatory questions, nearly 2,000 documents extending to more than 60,000 pages. This is in addition to the publicly available materials that we have been collecting. The task of analysing those documents has been immense and is ongoing. However, we are on a tight time frame and we must move to the next phase, which involves the examination of witnesses. The inquiry will have to be taken in stages, and each stage may be different with varying focuses and methodologies. The purpose of this first phase of the public hearings, which will occur over the next 3 weeks or so, is largely to build on the existing knowledge base about the regulatory regime and the regulator's understanding of its duties and powers and the practical aspects of the way it discharged its functions. It is quintessentially an exploratory information-seeking exercise. While there will be probing, it is likely to be relatively low-key. Those looking for more disputative exchanges and revelations in these early stages are unlikely to have their expectations met. It is, however, important to build the knowledge base before embarking on the more excursive forensic examinations of the conduct of organisations and individuals. Scrutiny of that type will be necessary if we are to fulfil our remit, and the Commission will not shy away from matters that are complex or controversial if and when they arise. But that is more likely to occur in later sessions. There is another reason for this approach. Clause 11 of the Terms of Reference requires us to recommend ways to enhance the regulatory framework. This will be one of the most significant and long-lasting contributions that this Royal Commission can offer the public of Western Australia. We want to make sure that we have a complete understanding of myriad issues, including the way the regulator and the casino licensee see the current regime, what the evidence and material tendered in the what the evidence suggests are deficiencies in its formulation or application, and what experts in the field can tell us about best practice nationally and internationally in casino regulation. With this in mind, the interim report may take the form of a discussion paper identifying issues for consideration. This will afford an opportunity for interested parties and the public generally to make submissions to assist us in devising a fully informed set of recommendations for inclusion in the final report. When I spoke on the 12th of April, I commented on some infrastructure and practical matters that were seen as important for the efficient running of this commission. I'll give you a brief update on some of those matters. In addition to this Royal Commission, there are 4 other bodies that have looked at or are looking at similar issues to those with which we are concerned. The first is the Bergen Inquiry. The second is the New South Wales Independent Liquor and Gaming Authority Inquiry. The third is the Victorian Royal Commission, and finally the Victorian Regulatory Review. They are all matters of public record, and I do not need to describe them. Those bodies in our commission are separate and independent, with different terms of reference and constituted under different legislation, but there is a good deal of commonality of subject matter. We have contacted those other inquiries in an attempt to reach an understanding about levels of cooperation so as to make the best use of efficiencies and available resources in the public interest, and to lessen practical burdens on interested parties who will be affected by the work of regulators or inquiries in at least 3 different jurisdictions. The process is complex due to confidentiality obligations in various statutes and the import of privilege. We are still pursuing those avenues, but protocols for information sharing are not yet in place, and we continue to rely on the assistance of parties to fill the gaps. We hope that in the not too distant future, we will be able to resolve outstanding issues. There's a related issue, namely the use we can make of the allegations, issues, findings, observations, materials and recommendations in or arising from the Bergen report. On the 12th of April, I mentioned that we were undertaking a detailed analysis of the Bergen report. One aspect of that analysis is a review of the source material tendered in the Bergen inquiry. Part of the discussions with those other bodies relates to access to those source materials. As those discussions progress, we will have more to say about the use we intend to make of the Bergen report. On the 12th of April, we also made mention of the likely cost of this inquiry and of the fact that there was no budget figure properly so called. That remains the case. The final infrastructure contracts have only just been completed, and in coming weeks, officers of the Commission will be able to enter into more formal discussions with government about necessary resources leading to the compilation of a budget. The Commissioners repeat that they are aware of the responsibility to keep costs within reasonable bounds and to utilise public resources in the best interests and most efficient manner so as to complete the inquiry on time and in accordance with the public interest. I wish to reiterate an observation I made when speaking on the 20th of April. We expect legal practitioners to conduct themselves in accordance with their professional obligations. They and the parties whom they represent must act respectfully, courteously and with integrity in their dealings with the Commissioners, Commission officers, witnesses and one another. We expect no less. Before I call on Ms Carl, there's another matter that the Commissioners wish to raise. One of the witnesses from whom we will hear is Mr Barry Sargent, a member of the Gaming and Wagering Commission and a former Director General of the Department. Mr Sargent is also a member of the Salaries and Allowances Tribunal for Western Australia. Since May 2018, Commissioner Colin Murphy has been a member of the Salaries and Allowances Tribunal. Mr Murphy disclosed that fact before he was appointed as a Commissioner. While he does not believe that his continued membership of the Tribunal would raise any difficulties in him carrying out his functions as a Commissioner, he has elected to resign from the Tribunal to avoid any perceived questions of influence or conflict. His resignation took effect from the 6th of May 2021. One of the functions of the Salaries and Allowances Tribunal is to review judges' salaries from time to time, although since 2017 no reviews have occurred under the government's legislated moratorium. Commissioner Jenkins and I, as retired judges, receive a statutory pension that is subject to adjustment as judges' salaries change. We are satisfied this has no impact on our functions in this Royal Commission, but wish to make the disclosure a matter of public record. I want now to say something about the practical matters of the way in which the evidentiary sessions will unfold. So far as is possible, we will allow the examinations and cross-examinations of witnesses to proceed with limited interventions from the commissioners. At the end of all of the cross-examinations, the commissioners will then ask the questions that have occurred to them, and then the re-examination can occur. That will be the general way in which we approach these matters. I should also say that council should be aware that this is being live streamed onto the website. The onus will be on council if they wish to make an application that they think cannot be aired fully without the live streaming being interrupted, that they should make that application at the time that the application is to be aired. So we will rely on council to advise us if they think that the live streaming should be interrupted, and we hope that in many instances the live streaming could continue and the objection be made in a way that doesn't interfere with proper rights. Ms. Carl.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, today the Perth Casino Royal Commission commences the examination of witnesses and the taking of evidence in public hearing. The purpose of this opening statement, which precedes the calling of evidence, is essentially twofold. First, to identify and explain certain aspects of the terms of reference, and second, to outline the nature and scope of the inquiry proposed in relation to those terms of reference. As already foreshadowed by Commissioner Owen, given the relatively short timeframe for this commission to complete its work, and in particular the requirement to deliver an interim report in respect of the regulatory framework by 30 June, the Commission is adopting a staged approach to its inquiry, and relevantly for the purposes of this opening statement and the hearings over the next 3 weeks, the first stage will be limited to an examination of paragraphs 8 to 11, or Part B of the terms of reference, which inquire into the framework of casino regulation in Western Australia. The terms of reference can be found at pub.0004.0003.001. That document could be called up now. And if we go to paragraphs 8 to 11, and enlarge that, please. Looking at those paragraphs together, paragraph 11 may be viewed in effect as the culmination of the Part B inquiry. It requires the Commission to inquire into and report on matters which might enhance the regulatory framework, and that extends to policy, legislative, administrative and structural reforms and changes. The inquiry that is the subject of paragraphs 8 to 10 of the terms of reference will directly inform a consideration of paragraph 11, and it is to those paragraphs that I now turn. First, paragraph 8, if we could pop out paragraph 8 by itself, please. Paragraph 8 calls for an inquiry into the adequacy of the existing regulatory framework in relation to casinos and casino gaming in Western Australia. That is not an inquiry into the adequacy of the regulatory framework generally, but rather its adequacy to address extant and emerging strategic risks. I pause here to observe that to focus particularly upon the risks of casinos and casino gaming is readily understandable. Indeed, the existence of certain risks can be taken as accepted in our regulatory framework, which generally prohibits casino gaming unless at a licensed venue operated by a licensed manager. On this point, it's interesting to note that this is not the first Royal Commission in Western Australia to examine the topic of casinos. In 1974, a Royal Commission with broad terms of reference inquired into gambling generally in Western Australia. That report can be found at PUB .0004.002.0320. The report contains a discussion about the pros and cons of establishing a casino in Western Australia. Even then, almost 50 years ago, certain risks associated with casino operations were well recognised, those being the social harms that emerge when a community is given ready access to gambling, and the vulnerability of casino operations to attracting organised crime and other criminal behaviour. Ultimately, that Royal Commission recommended the establishment of a casino in Western Australia, interestingly outside the metropolitan area in Exmouth, but subject to strict licensing requirements and controls in recognition of and to mitigate the risks that had been identified. In making that recommendation, the Royal Commission also identified the advantages to Western Australia in establishing a casino, those being economic benefits in terms of increased tourism and increased stimulated business activity, and social benefits in terms of the community's access to an increased range of recreational pursuits. I tender the 1974 Royal Commission report.
We got the number?
Yes, PUB.0004.002.0320.
The report of the Royal Commission on gambling, which bears the document identifier that Ms Carl has just announced, will be admitted into evidence as an exhibit.
Thank you, Commissioner. Returning to paragraph 8 of the terms of reference, the particular risks that are to be examined are extant and emerging strategic risks. Strategic risks are to be identified and distinguished from other types of risks in the context of casinos and casino operation, informed by reference to the public interest. In other words, risks to the maintenance of public confidence and trust in casino operations, by reference to the credibility, integrity and stability of casino operations, including risks of harm which threaten the socially responsible, lawful and efficient operation of casinos. In identifying strategic risks, it's to be recognised, as the 1974 Royal Commission did, that these include not just risks created by operating a casino, but also risks that affect the ongoing stability and viability of a casino operation. The majority of private entrepreneurial concerns have to deal with risks of the latter type, and the Perth Casino is no exception. But here we are concerned with such risks insofar as they relate to the public interest in terms of the social and economic benefits that the Perth Casino brings to Western Australia. The recent report by the Honourable Patricia Bergen SC of her inquiry under section 143 of the New South Wales Casino Control Act identified some strategic risks, and these have been specifically identified in paragraph 8 of the terms of reference itself, those being the risk of infiltration of criminal elements into casino operations, the exploitation of casino operations and junket tour operations to facilitate money laundering and other crimes involving the movement of money in cash or electronic form, and the infiltration of junk tour operations by foreign crime syndicates. This Commission seeks to inquire into and ascertain the strategic risks related to casino operations comprehensively, and for that purpose it is proposed to adduce expert evidence about, amongst other things, the extant and emerging strategic risks both here in Australia and internationally. One of the areas of interest for this inquiry as a possible emerging strategic risk is that of online casino-style gaming, and whether and to what extent its largely unregulated nature increases the risk of social harms and criminal exploitation of casino gaming, or threatens the continued stability and viability of physical casino operations, or both. The Bergen report will of course be very relevant to this inquiry beyond the matters to which I have just referred. Therefore, I take this opportunity to tender the report comprised of 2 volumes. And Commissioner, I'll read out the identification numbers. Firstly, Volume 1, BGN.001.001.001, and Volume 2, BGN 1.001.001.0334.
The 2 volumes of the Bergen report will be admitted into evidence as exhibits bearing the identifier numbers that Ms Carl has just read out.
Thank you, Commissioner. Staying with, or returning to, should I say, paragraph 8 of the terms of reference for a moment more, it would be incorrect to assume that the commencement of public hearings today marks the commencement of the work of this inquiry. In fact, the work of this commission commenced several weeks ago, particularly in relation to paragraph 8, with an examination of the history of the existing regulatory framework. Several interesting issues have already emerged from that examination, some of which will be relevant to the examinations that are to proceed over the next few weeks, and I'll mention just a few of those here. The Casino Control Act 1984 was the foundation piece of legislation that facilitated the establishment of the Perth Casino. It was followed the following year by the Casino Burswood Island Agreement Act 1985, which ratified the agreement for the construction and establishment of the casino complex at Burswood Island. The Casino Control Act established the Casino Control Committee to regulate the operations of the Perth Casino. Its members were appointed by the responsible minister. The committee had the power to appoint a chief casino officer, who was the executive officer of the committee responsible for the administration of the regulator's function. The role of chief casino officer continues to the present day, albeit that person occupying the role is now an officer of the Gaming and Wagering Commission. The committee could also appoint inspectors, casino inspectors, and had the power to employ other staff and enter into contracts for the purposes of the Act. By arrangement with the minister, the committee could utilise the services of officers or employees of the public service and the facilities of other government departments. Section 19 of the Act permitted and still permits the minister to negotiate and enter into agreements for the establishment and construction of a casino. Such agreements are now called casino complex agreements under the Act. And Section 21 provided for the licensing of a party to a Section 19 agreement. That was done by the minister, having received a recommendation by the Casino Control Committee to do so. The committee would first inform itself by investigating relevantly the financial status, reputation and capacity of the applicant to organise and conduct casino gaming. Notably, there were no specific suitability requirements as such in terms of honesty, integrity and compliance with the law that the licensee had to meet. That appears to remain the position. Once a licence was granted, the Casino Control Committee had a range of specific responsibilities under the Act and under the subsidiary regulations to do with the oversight and regulation of the licensee. Many of those responsibilities remain largely unchanged to this day and include such matters as authorising the games to be played at the casino or changes to the rules of the games played at the casino and the licensing of key casino employees. There were 2 reports that preceded the enactment of the Casino Control Act. The first was in 1983. The Government Casino Advisory Committee reported to a Cabinet subcommittee on the issue of establishing a casino in Western Australia. That report can be found at pub.004.002.0010. That report had broad terms of reference to report on the implications and implementation of the establishment of a casino in Western Australia. 2 of the 4 members of the Casino Advisory Committee recommended against a casino being established, although the committee did make recommendations about establishing a separate board to regulate the casino and concluded that an effective structure for the control of the casino, were it to be established, could be developed having regard to existing models in the Northern Territory and Tasmania. I also mention this report to draw attention to one aspect of it to do with the casino regulator, commencing at page 23, paragraph 49, which is at 0041. The regulator is there described as the most important feature in the control of casinos. That causes one to reflect on the importance of the inquiry by this Commission into the regulatory framework generally, that is the subject of Part B of the Terms of Reference. There is then a brief discussion, without conclusion, about whether the regulator should be independent of or subject to ministerial control. At paragraph 61, page 0042, the report references the earlier report of the Connor inquiry in Victoria, which favoured not only an independent regulator, but also suggested that the responsible minister for the administration of the licence should not have either a tourism or revenue-raising area of responsibility at the same time. This last point raises the matter of the potential for conflicts and tensions to emerge if the same person or entity oversees both the positive and negative impacts upon the state of a casino operation. I tender the 1983 report of the Casino Advisory Committee, document identification number PUB.0004.002.0010.
That document, with the identifier number that Ms. Carl has just announced, will be admitted into evidence as an exhibit.
The debate without conclusion in the 1983 report about whether the regulator should be independent of government stands in contrast to the clear conclusions about the need for a regulator expressed in the Bergen report at pages 624 to 625 in Volume 2. The Bergen report advocates for an independent regulator that is, 1, free from government and political influence, 2, adequately resourced and remunerated, and 3, able to employ its own staff. Coming back to the situation as it pertains in Western Australia, one might infer that the Casino Control Act as originally passed, and perhaps consistently with the equivocation in the 1983 report, opted for something of a halfway house, conferring a degree of independence upon the Casino Control Committee as a separately constituted body, but which in certain respects acted by arrangement with the Minister and reserving the ultimate decisions about licensing and entry into casino complex agreements to the Minister. That halfway house, for want of a better descriptor, persisted until 1987, when the Gaming Commission Act, now the Gaming and Wagering Commission Act, was enacted. At that time, the Casino Control Committee was effectively merged with the Gaming and Wagering Commission established under the new Act. The new commission had broad regulatory responsibility for gaming and wagering generally, including racing and community gaming, as well as casino regulation. This is despite a 1984 report from a committee appointed to inquire into and report upon gaming in Western Australia. That's at PUB.0004.0002.0261. In the context of discussing the benefits of a proposed new General Gaming Authority, that report concluded that the specialised nature and complexity of regulating casino operations justified casinos being regulated separately. In respect of the Gaming Authority itself, the committee recommended that the authority which was to become the Gaming and Wagering Commission that it is today should be independent and autonomous, that it should have its own executive officer and administration, and should be financially self-supporting. I tender that report. Commissioner, would you like me to read the number again?
Yes, please.
PUB.0004.0002.0261.
The document is admitted into evidence as an exhibit with the identifier number that Ms. Carl has just announced.
Thank you, Commissioner. The Gaming and Wagering Commission Act, as passed in 1987, did not reflect those particular recommendations from the 1984 committee report. In particular, the Act provided that the Commission was generally subject to ministerial direction. The Executive Director of the Office of Racing and Gaming was to be the Chairman of the Commission, and the acquisition of real and personal property by the Commission was subject to the approval of the Treasurer. The Act also contemplated that the Commission would primarily be staffed from the Office of Racing and Gaming. This essentially remains the position today, albeit that the relevant government department of the responsible minister is the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries. The Director General of that department is, as the Act provides, the Chairman of the Gaming and Wagering Commission. It would seem on its face that the structure of the Commission, in particular as it affects the regulation of casino operations, does not have the independence from government and control over its own staff that the Bergen report regards as important, or indeed as provided for by the statutory framework in other Australian jurisdictions. This is another of the areas of interest for inquiry by this Commission, particularly so because of the contents of paragraph 11 of the Terms of Reference, which require consideration of matters which may enhance the future capability and effectiveness not only of the Gaming and Wagering Commission but also the Department. More generally, amendments in 1987 to the Casino Control Act empowered the Minister to implement an inquiry with the powers of a Royal Commission into any matter arising under a casino agreement, and it increased the investigative powers of the Gaming and Wagering Commission beyond the powers previously held by the Casino Control Committee. In 1998, a number of further amendments were made to the Casino Control Act. These followed on from a 1996 report which reviewed the operations and effectiveness of the then Gaming Commission Act. That report can be found at pub.004.002.0129. I mentioned that amongst other things relevant to this present inquiry, that report discussed junket operators at page 81 and following, at page 0234 in the document identifier. At that time, junket tours were viewed favourably because of the significant contribution they made to casino revenue and therefore to state revenue by way of the tax paid on such tours. The report acknowledged concerns about the perceived correlation between junket tour operators and criminal activity, including money laundering, and that in other jurisdictions this required junket operators to be approved by the regulator. Interestingly, the report concluded that such a requirement served little purpose when premium and other players, known in the industry as high rollers, could gamble at the casino on an individual basis without such approvals. I tender the 1996 review of the Gaming Commission Act 1987, document identifier number PUB.0004.002.0129.
You tendering that?
Tender the 1996 report.
The document, the 1996 report, will be admitted into evidence with the document identifier number that Ms. Carl has just read out.
In any event, the amendments to the Casino Control Act in 1998, amongst other things, but relevantly and in substance, empowered the Minister to compel a close associate of a casino licensee to divest its financial interest in the licensee if the close associate was determined by the Minister not to be a suitable person to be associated with the gaming operations of the licensee. I pause here to note that the amendments did not extend the Minister's power to divesting the licensee itself of the licence specifically or expressly on the basis that the licensee was not suitable to hold the licence. Further, in respect of the power to divest a close associate of its financial interest in the licensee, the amendments did not extend to defining what amounted to a suitable person or identifying the criteria by which that might be assessed. These are issues that are extant in the current version of the legislation. The 1998 amendments also prohibited a casino licensee from entering into contracts for the supply of goods or services to the licensed casino without notice to the Commission, who could object to the contract. Notwithstanding the ambivalence expressed in the 1996 report about the need for regulation of junket tour operators, the 1998 amendments also introduced a power to make regulations to, amongst other things, impose restrictions on who may conduct junket tours and require junket tour operators to be approved. Regulations were then made in 1999 which required approval to conduct junkets to be sought from the Commission. Approval would be given if the applicant was of good character and good financial standing. Amongst other things, an applicant for approval was required to authorise the Commissioner of Police to make inquiries into their background and provide evidence of any criminal record they may have in another jurisdiction. These regulations were repealed in 2010. The detailed reasons for that are not immediately apparent, nor is it clear whether, and if so what, some other form of regulation of junket tour operators was implemented in substitution. This is another one of the areas of interest for inquiry by this Commission. When one looks back from the standpoint of 2021 at the legislative history of casino regulation in Western Australia, the policy developments underpinning the legislation have been iterative and influenced by a number of reports that have been commissioned, which to some extent reflect changing attitudes over time towards regulatory purposes and policies. It may be for that reason that a coherent and definite regulatory philosophy as to the statutory purposes and objectives of the Gaming and Wagering Commission in respect of the regulation of casinos and casino gaming is not easily and immediately identifiable from a review of the legislation, in particular as to the breadth and content of the regulatory role, and for example, whether it is intended to be proactive or entirely reactive. To conclude on paragraph 8 of the Terms of Reference, the Commission will continue its work examining the existing regulatory framework. Legislation in other jurisdictions, both within Australia and overseas, will also be examined for comparative purposes, by which the adequacy of the existing legislation may be further assessed. Ultimately, the product of that work will be addressed in the interim report, which may take the form of a discussion paper to be made available on the Commission's website for comment and submission. I then turn to paragraphs 9 and 10 of the Terms of Reference. The focus of inquiry in these two paragraphs is different to that in paragraph 8. It is an inquiry here directed at examining in a qualitative way how the Gaming and Wagering Commission implements and administers the regulatory framework in respect of casino operations in this state, and how the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries supports the Commission in that task. An understanding of the underlying statutory purposes and legislative policy objectives of the existing regulatory framework will be an important context for that inquiry. The inquiry, the subject of paragraph 9, will likely involve an examination of whether the Gaming and Wagering Commission has discharged its responsibilities under the Act in a manner that is suitable in order to achieve the regulatory purposes and objectives for which those responsibilities were devolved upon it in respect of casino operations. Paragraph 10 directs attention first to the capability and effectiveness of the Gaming and Wagering Commission to discharge its responsibilities in that regard, and second, to the capability and effectiveness of the Department in supporting the Commission. That inquiry is essentially directed towards measuring the success of each of them in practice in achieving their respective objectives and purposes. It is important to appreciate that paragraphs 9 and 10 of the Terms of Reference are concerned with an inquiry into the conduct of the Commission and the Department, and not directly an inquiry into the conduct of individual officers. In later phases of the public hearings, it is likely that this Commission will examine specific situations where, for example, it is alleged that an individual officer or officers may have had an actual or perceived conflict of interest. The purpose of doing so is to consider the appropriateness and effectiveness of the Gaming and Wagering Commission's discharge of its functions and responsibilities by reference to actual examples. That inquiry will inform the conclusions that this Commission reaches about the Gaming and Wagering Commission's conduct more generally. In regard to the general, an examination of the appropriateness, capability and effectiveness of the Gaming and Wagering Commission in discharging its regulatory functions and responsibilities will involve looking into a number of aspects of its operations, including the expertise, training and experience of its board, chief casino officer and inspectors in casino regulation, the type and sufficiency of the Commission's financial and physical resourcing, the quality of the Commission's corporate governance, including its approach to the identification and management of conflicts of interest, being a matter that is expressly addressed in paragraph 10 of the Terms of Reference, the suitability and effectiveness of the legal, structural and practical arrangements between the Department and the Gaming and Wagering Commission, whether and to what extent the Commission operates independently and autonomously from both the Department and the responsible minister, the Commission's understanding of its statutory purposes and objectives and its approach to its function as a regulator of the Perth Casino, whether that has changed over time or from time to time, and if so, why, whether and to what extent the Commission regulates or attempts to regulate in respect of the risks associated with junket tours to the Perth Casino, whether and to what extent the Commission regulates or attempts to regulate in respect of the risks of money laundering associated with the Perth casino, whether and to what extent the Commission oversees or attempts to oversee that the casino licence holder or its close associates are or remain suitable persons to hold or be associated with the holder of a casino licence, and in that regard in particular, how the Commission has responded in the last few years to the media allegations and evidence published during the course of the Bergen inquiry concerning Crown Resorts Limited. The examinations in this first phase of hearings are directed towards the areas of inquiry that I have just identified. This Commission will hear from current and former board members of the Commission, current and former chief casino officers, and, if time permits, some current and former casino inspectors. The first witness in the hearing scheduled for this week is Mr Duncan Ord, the Director General of the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries, and the current chairperson of the Gaming and Wagering Commission. And I invite Ms Seward to now call Mr Ord.
Just before we do that, could I just get an indication from the bar table as to who is likely to want to be involved in this, Mr Dharmananda?
We may wish to be involved, Mr Commissioner.
Yeah. And Ms Seward?
Yes, we will wish to be involved in.
Is there anyone else that... Mr...
There is a possibility the Gaming and Wagering Commission may have a couple of questions in relation to Mr Ord in clarification of a couple of matters in his statement.
Mr Evans.
Yeah, and Commissioner, for Mr Connolly, Mr Malone, there may be also some questions coming.
Now, Mr Dharmananda, I understand you have an application.
Yes, Commissioners, we have an application with respect to a non-publication order in relation to some of the material I conferred with Ms Cahill before proceedings commenced, and I think those matters may not necessarily come to the fore during the course of the day, but we do have that application.
I think we're minded just to leave it at the present stage, unless you want a temporary order made. But I think we'll leave it and see how the examination progresses.
Thank you.
And you can make the application whenever you wish.
Thank you. On the basis of what Ms Cahill tells me, I think we can let it stand for the moment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now we'll call Mr Ord. Have they got the... Is it on the... Okay. Mr Ord, would you mind standing just... could you just give us your full name and then indicate whether you wish to swear an oath or make an affirmation?
I'll swear an oath.
Okay, and if you could start with your full name.
My name is Duncan St John Beresford Ord.
Thank you. If you swear the oath.
I sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence that I give to this Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr Ord. You may sit. Ms Seward.
Thank you. Mr Ord, you're the Director General of the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries.
Yes.
And you received a witness summons to attend and give evidence at this Royal Commission.
Yes.
And as part of that process, you prepared a witness statement. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
I'm not sure if the Commission has a copy that they wish to have in front of him or we'll be doing that electronically.
Do you need a hard copy, Mr Ord, or...?
Do you have the document?
If I can access it in some way, it'd be appreciated.
Yes. Mr Ord's statement...
Right. Yes, I have it on the screen. Thank you, Your Honour.
The number is DLG 0001 0002 0001. Mr Ord, that is up on the screen. Is that the statement that you prepared for the purposes of this Royal Commission?
Yes, it is.
Mr Ord, can you manipulate that statement yourself?
I'm just trying to.
No. So he probably does need
a
his
hard
own
copy.
copy.
Is that a clean copy? That's good, just got the document.
Thank you.
just ask you to look at that document that's in front of you. Does that look like the statement you prepared for the purposes of this Royal Commission?
Yes, it is.
And is it is it 42 pages
For the meeting of the 20th.
Yes,
with 140 paragraphs?
yes,
Now, I understand you have, in reading through that, identified two small corrections you would like to make to the statement.
yes, I did.
And I think the first one you said is at paragraph 23, is that correct?
Yes,
I think if the Commission looks at paragraph 23, the final sentence seems to end mid-sentence. What did you wish to add at that point? I think the sentence reads, 2 examples are the application of public health directions to the casino and...
and it was related to the opening and closing of the casino due to the pandemic that we need to be engaged in the protocols surrounding those.
So those were the 2 examples of the matters that COVID
Yes,
led to. And paragraph 87. Identified a typo in the very last line of paragraph 87.
yes. And it should be to respond of a straightforward affair to respond and engage members instantly for matters of urgency. So it should be of urgency, not for urgency.
Were there any other corrections you wish to make to your witness statement?
No,
Okay. And is this statement with those 2 corrections true and correct to best of your knowledge and belief?
yes,
I tender the statement.
Thank you, Ms.
Mr.
Seward. The statement of Duncan St John Beresford Ord, OAM, which was signed on the 6th of May 2021, is admitted into evidence as an exhibit bearing the identifier DLG.0001.0002.0001, noting the corrections to paragraphs 23 and 87.
Commissioner, there in that statement there is a cross-reference to a number of documents. An index was provided with that statement to the Commission. I'm not sure of the process the Commission wishes to follow, whether tendering of the statement should therefore also involve tendering of each of the documents. By my count they were 33, or whether you would like me to read out the document identifier for each of those documents and tender those at this point.
There is an index that has the document identifiers
Yes.
on them.
Yes, there is.
We will take the index as part of the exhibit that's got the document identifier number that I've read out.
Thank you. I have no further evidence to lead from this witness.
Commissioners, 2 of those documents in the 33 identified in Mr. Ord's statement are documents in respect of which we raise an application. It may be that we don't need to deal with it now because it's not going on the screen, but I thought I'd inform the Commission of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Carl.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now, Mr. Ord, just so that I can understand the questions that I'm able to put to you and ones that I should put to somebody else, if you could just clarify something for me to begin with. I understand that you have recused yourself presently from involvement in meetings of the members of the Gaming to the extent that those meetings deal with the Commission's responses to this Royal Commission. Is that right?
that is true.
But you continue to involve yourself in the work of the Commission otherwise,
Yes,
in your capacity as chairperson.
as in my capacity as chair.
Are you involved at all in the department's response to this Royal Commission?
Yes,
And why are you involved in the response for the department but not in the response to GWC?
well, I hold the dual roles of chair of the GWC and director general of the department. So under that responsibility, I've prepared the department's response or oversighting the department's response.
Just coming back to you're recusing yourself from being involved in the responses on behalf of the GWC to this Royal Commission. Why did you decide to do that?
To enable the members of the Commission to form their own views on the questions being asked of them, independent to any views that I might have put in as chair jointly with them, given we act in essentially as a committee of equals, that I considered that might compromise their submission, given that I was also responding on behalf of the department that was serving them.
So your decision to nevertheless remain involved in responding to this Royal Commission on behalf of the department, you didn't have a similar concern the other way, that you might compromise the interests of the department by having regard to the interests of GWC?
I considered that a lesser concern.
Have you effectively subordinated GWC's interests in responding to the Royal Commission to the department's interests and left the GWC members to deal with the response on behalf of the Royal Commission?
No, I discussed with Mr Barry Sargent, the former chair, who's a member, if he felt that he was able to assist the Commission in the preparation of answers to the questions, many of which may have predated current members of the Commission. I've also made all documents available and of course I've participated in the Gaming Wagering Commission meetings that have occurred since the calling of the Royal Commission, and continue to carried out my chair responsibilities at that level, including answering any questions that they have sought from me and needed to assist them in their preparation for this.
Just in terms of your role as Director General of the department, you maintain all of your responsibilities presently. You haven't transferred those to anyone during the course of the Royal Commission.
That is correct.
Thank you. Now, are you happy if, when I ask you questions today, I simply refer to the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries in the shorthand way as the department, and the Gaming and Wagering Commission as GWC?
Yes.
Now, your witness statement attaches your current curriculum vitae, your CV. If we could call that up, please, DLG.0001.002.007. And if we turn to the next page, please, which is at 0002. You have your current employment history set out there?
Generally, yes.
Well, generally, you don't mention in there that you are the chair of the GWC.
No.
And you don't mention that anywhere in your CV?
I don't recall that I do, no.
Is there a reason for that?
No, I just had responsibilities including and included a number of things I have. That list could go on for pages, so it was just a summary of some of the things I did.
It's not exhaustive.
No, unfortunately.
Now, between 2014 and 2017, as you explain in your witness statement, you were the Director General of the Department of Culture and Arts, is that right?
Yes.
And when the so-called machinery of government changes were made in 2017, you were made Director General of an amalgamated department.
Yes.
And that amalgamated department had and has responsibility for racing, gaming and liquor, is that right?
Yes.
And also sport, the museum,
Yes.
the art gallery,
Yes.
State Theatre,
Yes.
the library,
Yes.
local government generally.
Generally, yes.
And if I read the last annual report correctly, also the Cat Act and the Dog Act.
That is correct.
And on your appointment as Director General of the amalgamated department, you became chair of the GWC as provided for in the
As
GWC
provided
Act.
for in the Act, yes.
And your CV indicates you've previously worked across a range of government departments since 2004. Yes?
Yes.
But your background was not at all in relation to gaming regulation, was it?
No.
And indeed, in terms of regulatory experience generally, is it fair to say that the closest you came before becoming Director General of the department was that you were the Acting Director General of the Department of Planning for 5 months in 2013-14?
Well, within my responsibilities as Director General of the Department of Culture and the Arts, I had the administrative responsibility for the State Records Act, which interestingly was an act that came out of the WA Royal Commission, a very significant piece of regulatory information, about government information, and I took that responsibility very seriously. I was Director General of DCA for three years or so, but I undertook an administrative review of how that Act was proceeding, given that it was itself a product of its time and much had changed, particularly around digital information that the Act hadn't foreseen, and I was concerned that we were at risk of losing information that would support matters such as matters that have been considered by this Commission. So I was very active in trying to put forward and subsequently successful in bringing forward a Cabinet submission during this last period of government for a review of that piece of legislation. So I considered that I was well equipped to deal with the principles of regulatory framework, what's in communities' interest, how regulatory legislation becomes dated, and the importance of the adequacy of your oversight of that. I didn't have a direct responsibility for it. It was the State Records Commission, but I had the administrative responsibility to the Minister that it was adequately supported and that we were in fact giving effect to that legislation. And as you say, prior to that, I was Acting Director General Department of Planning with planning legislation. I sat on the WA Planning Commission, so I had experience there.
So supervision of state records or oversight of state records and the Department of Planning was your regulatory experience in government prior to your current role?
Well, I had roles in state development and Indigenous affairs and also in training, in which I came into contact with or had significant role in working alongside a whole range of legislation, from Heritage Act, Aboriginal Affairs Planning Authority Act, a whole range of state legislation in state development, Native Title Act, and in training I was part of the review of the State Apprenticeships Act. So I considered that I had been involved as a director or above position in regular reviews of legislation. In fact, I think because of that I was reasonably well equipped to contribute to those, that was one of the reasons my career progressed.
Before your government experience, or your experience in government, put it that way, in the private sector your experience was exclusively in arts administration, was it?
That's correct.
Now, when you assumed the role of GWC Chair, did you undertake any training or course of education in respect of discharging the functions of a government regulator?
Not at that time, no.
Had you ever before?
No.
Or in relation to casino regulation?
No.
Or casino operations?
No.
Not at the time you assumed the chair? Not before and not after?
No, I didn't undertake further education on regulatory practice at that time or subsequently.
Can we go back to your witness statement, please? That is DLG.0001.0002.001.
Yes.
And paragraph 8 there. Now, this is in effect a summary of the evidence you just gave about your view as to your suitability for the regulatory oversight aspects of your current position. Is that right? Is that a fair representation of paragraph 8?
Yes, it is. In taking on these roles, of course, you brew yourself in what those responsibilities are. Given the matters that were before me in 2017 when I took on the leadership of the new agency, I had to take on a number of roles that I hadn't done before, including this one. And in taking that on, I prepared myself for this, including reading the legislation, getting briefed by the predecessor, Barry, and he was, of course, joining the commission so as a member, so I had access to his guidance and mentorship. Briefings from staff. I read through all the incoming government briefings and so on. So I prepared myself to fulfil my duties as chair without becoming an expert on every matter concerning casino operations, which was certainly not. I would not have had the time or capacity to do that.
If we go to page 0005 and paragraph 19, here you're talking about training for GWC members generally and when they are newly appointed to the GWC. And I just want to direct your attention to the last sentence there. Due to the specialisation involved in numerous technical matters and the overall complexity of casino regulations, department staff are available and do brief members as required. So you appreciate, do you, that the task of casino regulation is a complex one?
Yes, extremely so.
And very technical?
Yes.
And yet you yourself didn't undertake any training of a formal kind before assuming the role of GWC chair.
No, well, I had to take the role on at obviously a short duration, so it wasn't that I got a lead up period of time saying you will become the next chair of the GWC and can you undertake appropriate training to fulfil that role. But I did what any new member would do when they were appointed, which is to take advantage of the expertise of the department staff and the way in which the Gaming Wagering Commission prepared itself in terms of issues coming before it, was that the papers prepared for the GWC would include references to its legislation or prior history of the issue and so on, and that officers would attend meetings and give all those technical explanations so that we were making the decisions in the community interest based on a whole range of expertise that individual members brought to the Commission. They may not have had prior experience in gaming and wagering, but the members came, like I did, with a range of expertise from previous work on legislation or certainly understanding of the critical issues that the community had as expectations about harm reduction from the casino.
Is it your view that the chairperson of the GWC need not have any prior knowledge or experience of casino regulation in order to adequately equip themselves in that role?
I think further in my evidence, I outlined that I have a view that an independent chair, and probably an independent chair with particular skill sets, would be an advantage given the Director General of such a complex department is better harnessing all the resources that the Commission then needs to undertake its responsibilities. And the independent chair can obviously focus entirely on that. So I do see the merit of that as a response to strengthening the governance of the Commission.
So I think the word you used was it would be an advantage for an independent chair to have relevant casino regulation experience.
Or legal regulatory experience. I think, whether they need to be an expert on casinos, but an expert on complex regulation, corporations and the like would be an advantage.
So do you see it just as an advantage or a necessity?
In the situation of the growing complexity and the likely direction of casino operations in Australia in the future, I would see it as a necessity.
And if a chair does not have that, doesn't come to the role of chair with that skill and experience, is it your view that it's necessary for them to undertake a course of training or education in relation to government regulatory matters or casino regulation in order to equip themselves in that role?
It would always be an advantage if members were able to undertake, specialised training in this area. The degree to which you could train in every contingency of a casino operation, I'm not sure, but certainly I think there are matters that are where there would be an advantage in having a training program. We've just recently addressed that issue in local government and prepared training materials for every elected member in local government for much the same reason. So I would be of the view that that could be done and should be done.
That it's necessary that it be done?
Well, I think that, again, the intent would always be to improve, and I've noticed the Commissioner's comments earlier around the future strengthening, and yes, I think it would further strengthen the oversight if we were able to put in place a training program that could be available to those who got appointed to the Commission.
Now, Commissioner, I understand we break at 11 a.m. and that's a convenient time.
Well, I thought we said 11:15.
Did we? I'm happy to proceed. I was.
Yeah, whenever you get to a
I
convenient
was told
spot.
11 a.m. I'll keep going. Can I ask you now about the other members of the GWC, apart from Barry Sargent, Mr. Ord? All of those other members have been appointed to the Commission since you became chair. Is that right?
Yes.
And these appointments are made by the Minister, of course. I think you mentioned that in your witness statement.
Yes.
And do I understand from your evidence in your witness statement that you do not have any involvement at all in the Minister's process of appointment?
No, well, I do in terms of what the department helps to prepare for vacancies on the Commission by preparing the Minister's office by way of briefings. The way we would proceed is to identify the member's term as coming to a conclusion. When it comes to a conclusion, the skills that they bring to the Commission, whether they have an interest in being, if they're eligible to be renewed or not, and that is presented as a package to the Minister's office. Then the Minister will proceed to engage in looking at various places for appropriate appointees.
So can you just pause there, please, Mr. Ord? I think you're looking at paragraph 18 of your witness statement as you respond to that question. If we could bring that up on the screen, please.
Whilst that's happening, can I just ask whether that briefing to the Minister comes from you as head of the department or from GWC?
Well, it's prepared by the administrative staff within the department and submitted by myself
As
Director General and Chair.
So you don't distinguish between whether that's coming from the GWC or the department?
Well, it's an administrative function of mine as Chair to advise that these vacancies are occurring. So it's done by the GWC staff in my department, and I submit, because I report to the Director General to the Minister as Director General, then in bringing those matters to his attention, I do so through my Director General's meetings.
Thank you.
So just coming back to paragraph 18, Mr. Ord, the evidence that you just gave along the lines of this paragraph, as I understand it, was describing what the department or GWC did to inform the minister in respect of whether an existing member should be reappointed. Is that right?
Whether an existing member was seeking to be reappointed,
Yes.
I did inform or advise the minister on the appropriateness of that decision.
But when it came to a vacancy, for whatever reason, there was no question of a person being reappointed, did you have any involvement in that process?
No, I wasn't involved in the process of appointing members to the commission.
Was not something that you would discuss with the minister about suitable candidates?
We discussed the issues impacting the commission, and members that were on the commission when I was appointed chair had a strong responsible gaming concern background, and remembering that we also cover off our other elements. So there was the ones who were interested in, the racing part of the commission's remit. So the casino is only one of the elements of the Gaming Wagering Commission oversight. Through Minister Papalia's time, he made more strategic appointments of people with corporate governance and ultimately with the last member with a policing investigations background.
So just coming back to my question, was the department or GWC involved in consulting with the minister where there was a vacancy about who might fill it
No,
at all?
not about individuals, no.
Not proposing suitable candidates?
Well, the Minister's office, of course, talked to many potential candidates. They had to go through a vetting process around conflicts and suitability to be appointed. Those matters are generally done in such a way that they are confidential, and so there wasn't discussions of the nature of appointments beyond me being notified of the intention to appoint.
And let me just break that down. Did I understand from something you said a moment ago that there might be a discussion of generality about a particular type of person with certain experience or skills that might be useful on the board, but not a discussion about individual candidates?
That is correct. It was just, these are the matters before the Commission, matters that members, would need to have consideration of, and that was leading us towards greater focus on strategic risks over some of the matters that were before the Commission for several years prior to 2017.
And when the Minister had identified a candidate that he thought was suitable and was intending to appoint, he wouldn't discuss that with GWC, the existing membership, before he actually proceeded to appoint?
No, those matters, the Minister would, I understand, probably put several people forward, and that would be progressed to Cabinet and then subject to Cabinet consideration, then ultimately appointment. So generally, as I said, those matters are done with a degree of confidentiality for obviously reasons that people being considered may not wish to have their candidature broadly discussed outside.
Beyond identifying the general objectives that the Minister may have had in identifying and then proposing to Cabinet a suitable candidate, do you have any knowledge of the more detailed process by which the Minister identifies suitable candidates?
Well, I think they use extensive research on background, experience, and obviously they, as I said, they do consider if anyone would be potentially conflicted, and sought people of high community calibre because the it was obviously always known that the independence of people appointed to the Gaming Wagering Commission had to be beyond repute, and they, from my time, there were excellent members of very high integrity appointed. So the processes used by governments prior to and during my time appear to have been very appropriate.
Thinking about the existing membership of GWC and putting aside Barry Sargent for a moment, so just thinking about everybody except him, do any of the members have, in your view, substantial skills or prior experience in respect of government regulation?
I mean, yes, Katie's obviously been a former minister, government member, and officers, other members have got very high quality qualifications in accounting, finance, and areas of probity and assurance that were a very good match for the matters that they were looking at when reports have been brought forward.
So specifically in government regulation, do any of them have substantial experience or skills in prior experience or skills in government regulation?
Katie would be Katie Hodgson-Thomas would be the major expert in that on the current group of 76 commissioners.
And what is it about her experience that you say?
I think long-standing.
Sorry, I'll just finish the question for the transcript. That's
yes,
fine.
Yes, indeed. Sorry, apologies.
Her experience related to government regulation.
Yes, as a member of Parliament and obviously been on parliamentary committees reviewing legislation, being a minister.
Apart from Barry Sargent, again, just reflecting on the current members of the Commission, do any of them have prior skills or experience in casino operations or casino regulation specifically?
Not to my knowledge.
And I might leave it there.
Yes. We'll resume again at 11:35, and for those of you who remember the approach of the late Chief Justice David Malcolm to punctuality, you will know that 11:35 means 11:35. Please be seated. Yes, Carl.
Thank you, Commissioners. So I was asking you before the break, Mr. Ord, about the other members of GWC. And I just want to ask you a couple of questions in a general way about the, as they like to say these days, the skill set, if you like, of the GWC members as a whole. Firstly, do you consider it important for one or more members of GWC to have some background and experience in casino operations or casino regulation?
Certainly an advantage, and obviously Mr. Sargent fulfilled that role during my time as chair.
But just to be clear, is it important for at least one member to have experience in casino operations and casino regulation?
I would think so.
And that's Mr. Sargent presently. Now, do you consider it important for one or more members of GWC to have some background and experience in crime detection and law enforcement?
I didn't at the time that I took on the role because the remit of the Gaming Wagering Commission extended across community gaming, racing, regulation and the casino. While the casino I think in my statement I said occupied probably 70% of our agenda time. A lot of the decisions to be made related to essentially community gaming activities, and a number of the risks that are emerging that we were concerned about were mentioned by the commissioners, including the rise, or I think yourself actually in your preamble, which were related to the emergence of unregulated online casinos and gaming, increase in sports betting, synthetic lotteries and so on. So at that point, we believe we were part of a network of regulatory agencies that oversaw casino operations, federal agencies like obviously AUSTRAC, ASIC, and the like, and at state level, of course, fellow agencies that I work with quite closely, WA Police and the CCC, and therefore our ability to refer matters or have matters referred to us in partnership with those other agencies were the areas where we imagined that if we were concerned around criminality, that we would pick that up in our interface with other agencies rather than having an expert on the Commission itself just focused on the risk of criminality. However, Mr. Thomas, Steve Thomas was appointed, having been formerly served with West Australian Police, and I've seen the benefit of his perspective on things since he was appointed to the Commission. So in answering your question fully, I would say that that experience and background is a very valuable addition to the skills that are on the Commission.
So, Mr. Thomas has a policing background, you say?
Yes.
And so he, as far as you're concerned, is the member that brings that skill set of experience in crime detection and law enforcement to the GWC board.
Yes, well, each of the members, will look at the briefing papers or audit findings or reports from different perspectives, some more financial, accounting, taxation, compliant sort of perspective, others around the effectiveness of problem gambling interventions by Crown and so on. He's brought a good questioning mind to matters of risk related to potential criminality or breaches to our regulations and whether we should be more prosecutorial or perhaps we've had a focus on improvement notices and things.
Do you consider the current membership of the GWC, when you look at it as a group altogether, to have an adequate range of skills and experience necessary to perform the role of the GWC?
Well, that's in the context of the existing legislation, and as you've laid out very extensively, the legislation is essentially very similar to that which was essentially created around 1985 when casinos first considered, and had a strong focus on the oversight of the operations of the casino. Now that the casino is part of a national body or national corporation, then matters that are outside of the state's jurisdiction come into play. The actual complexity of corporate governance has significantly changed, and of course, gaming is becoming more internationalised with inherent national and international risks associated with that. So there would be good cause to consider whether, given the significant remit of the Game Wagering Commission across racing, wagering, community gaming and so on, and emerging areas of gaming and the casino, whether that 6 members and the chair is adequate to cover all of the skills you need for all of that is a matter that would need further consideration.
Is there a question in your mind as to whether it does or doesn't?
I certainly think that strengthening of the membership to take into account these increased risks would be an advantage, whether that's a bigger commission or I've indicated that independent chair could add considerable capability.
Let's just talk about skills and experience of members and the membership as a whole. In what areas of previous skill and experience do you think that the membership of the GWC could be enhanced? What skills and experience are missing?
Well, I think it has been enhanced by recent appointments to have a much stronger focus on corporate and financial risk and strategic risk, and therefore we have lost members that had a greater focus on other areas of racing and gaming, and areas that are mostly to do with the harm minimisation related to people's gaming habits where they may be at risk, and people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds or people who have got gaming addiction problems.
So just so I understand that answer, do you say those are areas where the existing skill set of the GWC could be enhanced?
Well, by strengthening the strategic oversight that we've now done, we have lost some of what we previously had, which was a strong focus on the community minimisation of harm, which makes that potentially either need a bigger commission to bring all those skills to bear, or you say the commission is going to deal with strategic risk and there are other mechanisms to deal with the others.
I just try and get a summary of your evidence. Maybe I'll put the question this way, Mr. Ord. If tomorrow you were given the opportunity by the Minister to appoint any number of additional members so that you had the skill set and experience across a range of areas that you thought was appropriate for the board, what kind of skills and experience would you wish to add to those that already exist?
Look, I think strategic legal, corporate legal, so that really understands the structuring of trust companies, and it's to look at the governance of Crown at that strategic corporate governance and legal area would be a great advantage to us. And as said, given we've strengthened, I think, matters that would be relevant to some of the risks that have been identified in the Bergen inquiry through the recent appointments or appointments during the inquiry really, then there may be areas of community concern around the community risk of proliferation of gambling behaviours that I'd be concerned might be lost over time, in which case I'd like to add some of those back.
And what are the skills that have been added, skills and experience that have been added in the, if I understand what you've just said, recently in the context of these issues that have emerged recently in relation to Crown?
Carmelina and Jodie have both come in with very high quality forensic accounting, finance and audit skills. And they've been added a significant amount of rigour to the interrogation of information that has been provided to the Commission by Crown. Katie had previously served on the Commission and has come back in and again I think provides experience and a good understanding of regulatory practice. And Steve obviously has come in with his policing and business intelligence and data understanding. So they are really strong contributors now, and questioning what is coming before them, and in terms of the information we see around how we interrogate it and then how it's presented to the Commission.
What's the benefit? What benefit do you see in that forensic accounting expertise that you say has now come into GWC?
Well, I think, as I said, we were primarily focused on protecting the a sort of more gullible punter, I suppose, from a sophisticated casino operator, and clearly that was a concern in the early days of preparing such intense quality control of the operations of the casino to ensure the games were fair, that machines operate the way they should, that staff play the games according to all the rules that are established and so on. The area which has opened up as a risk clearly is what is the source of money that people are using to gamble. And this has always been a vexed concern because if I give an example of a mythical person or a fake person that walks through and they've got $100 in the pocket into the casino, I don't really have a knowledge whether that money is undeclared tax income, whether it's money they've stolen from the employer, whether it's money they got from a drug deal, or whether it's hard-earned, wages, tax paid, and they're just going for a good night out. And that's true at the higher end of the gamer who may be a more professional gambler and have a gambling account and put significant amounts into an account and gamble with that and then settle on a periodic basis. The risk that's opened up is obviously that the regulations that we understood to exist in the banking system to identify suspicious transactions or suspicious sources of money didn't protect Crown at that level. Crown's own oversight of its anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism activities didn't pick up some of the suspicious transactions, and that though there were reporting of suspicious transactions to AUSTRAC, that reporting didn't lead to referrals back to us. It's fairly clear to me that we have powers within the Act to at least do auditing of those bank accounts and such that come before us, because we audit them for tax purpose, and there would be an advantage to audit those ourselves for unusual patterns of transaction, and if we have concerns over those, to refer them ourselves to agencies rather than wait for the agencies to come to us. In doing that, we would need that forensic intelligence capability, either ourselves or being able to contract it in, or a combination of both. And clearly you'd need members of the Commission with the capabilities to assess what was being told to them and make appropriate directions to Crown, or if we concern criminality, of course, then we would have to abide by other legislation which would require us to retain confidentiality and refer the matters to appropriate authorities.
All right, I'm going to change tack slightly here and take you back to paragraph 19 of your witness statement, if I can. That's at page 0005. Thank you. We were here before the break, Mr. Ord, in a different context. Here I want to focus on the first part of the paragraph rather than the last, where you explain that there's no formal training program for GWC members, but when they're newly appointed, they are inducted by department staff working for the Chief Casino Officer. Can you, first of all, tell me who it is precisely in terms of their role, who performs that induction?
I'm not sure I'm exactly the person. It would be the Secretariat for the Gaming and Wagering Commission, the provision of all the policies, procedures, accessing systems that they require. It's quite confidential, obviously, so it takes quite a bit to get the commissioners up to speed with accessing the information they require and being across the procedures of the Commission. So the Secretariat or senior staff working under the Chief Casino Officer would undertake that.
Is it more a matter of just explaining to a new member, a newly appointed member, where they might go within the database of documents within the department to find relevant policies and other documents?
That's part of it, but also who the key staff are that are their contacts and how to engage. As I said in earlier testimony, the Gaming Wagering Commission papers are structured in such a way to assist commissioners understand the source of the recommendations, where they're based on information related to statutes or policies that are not in the actual legislation itself and so on. So they get inculcated into the workings of the committee by way of both access to expert advice and the information is provided meeting by meeting. So they get progressively exposed to the significantly broad expanse of matters that come before the Commission.
In the second sentence of this paragraph, you mention that GWC maintains a training budget. What is the approximate amount of that budget annually?
I think it's somewhere between $30,000 and $60,000.
And when you say here that in the next sentence that members can seek permission to access funds to undertake training, does that mean that GWC doesn't have an annual training program for members of any description? Because the
funds available are relatively constrained, it was agreed by the Commission itself that they would consider requests to access funds for those purposes through the Commission. So members would bring forward and say, I'd like to attend this conference or I'd like to undertake this course. None of those were refused. It gave me the opportunity, if the fund was overdrawn, then I could look to supplement it from, either put up a paper to suggest the budget be increased out of Gaming Wagering Commissions, could we maintain a reserve fund. We were always able to meet member demands within the budget. But there's also quite a lot of materials that are available to members through our membership of other associations in national gaming associations and so on that didn't require a cost element but were available for members to access.
So understanding your evidence in summary, it's up to individual members to find for themselves a suitable training event and then obtain permission to access the training budget for that.
Yes, I mean members are appointed as only part-time members and have other aspects to their life. So members tended to bring forward when they were available to do something and where they particularly wished to advantage themselves to or take advantage of new information that could be available. So we left that to the members. We did, of course, bring forward to members when there were opportunities that we became aware of that they might be interested in.
When a member seeks permission to access the training budget, who do they seek permission from?
It's raised at a meeting and it's agreed by the commissioners on vote.
I see. And so the Commission as a group has control of the training budget?
Yes.
And you described it a moment ago as constrained. It's a constrained budget.
I said it was a limited sum. But it was based on budgeting on historic use. So the funds were essentially those funds that had been used in the past, members would draw on that budget during the year, and then we'd replenish the budget at the end of the year.
But if the members as a group decided that the training budget wasn't sufficient, then they could, as a group, obviously decide to increase it.
Yes, they could. They did have control of the overall appropriation and could have put it into different aspects.
And is that something that's ever been considered, to your knowledge, during the time that you have been chair of the GWC?
I think I was noticing a greater interest as the issues before the Commission became more national issues. The Commission was very keen to take advantage of attending national events. several were able to travel and go to fairly high-level conferencing on risks in gaming. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit, and what was emerging as quite a big program was constrained.
Now, just on that last sentence that I took you to before the break this morning, where you talk about department staff being available to brief members as required. Who are those staff?
Well, they're the members of the Racing, Gaming and Liquor Division of my department.
And how do members of GWC know which person to contact?
So we have two staff that rotate in being, if you like, the secretariat to the commission, and they. So there's always one of them that's available to members at all times, allowing for leave and other, times when they might be available, and they facilitate. They act as a single go-to person, Emily and Kate, and they Emily and Kelly, and they then say, okay, then you need to go and to speak to this person, and then facilitate that.
So Emily and Kelly are in effect administrative people. Are they within that unit?
Yeah, they manage the agenda process and all the interface with the members in terms of their access to the online facilities and staff briefings.
And how often, to your knowledge, do department staff brief members on technical or specialist matters?
I'm not aware of the frequency. I haven't tried to intervene, if you like, in controlling any of that. So I've wanted to encourage them to feel that they can ask questions regardless of me knowing whether they're asking it or not. But I certainly are aware that members have been very active in asking for technical briefings at GWC meetings in their own right, and they're normally put on notice so they're available to the next meeting. And we've had obviously probably an increase in those technical briefings over the last number of years as some of the issues have become more complex and of high risk.
Can I ask you about the remuneration of members of the GWC? You yourself are not remunerated for your role as chair separately from your remuneration as Director General of the Department, is that right?
That's correct.
And the other members of the GWC are remunerated in an amount of approximately $16,000 per annum.
That's correct.
And what's your view about the adequacy of that remuneration?
Well, I understand that's set by the SAT, so I don't have a view.
You don't have a view because it's set by the SAT?
Well, yeah, it's an independent process. It looks across all government boards and I'm sure use appropriate expertise to determine the value.
Now, I want to ask you about the Chief Casino Officer of the GWC, and if we could go to paragraph 33, please, page 0009 of your witness statement, and you make reference there to the role not comprising a standalone position of employment within the department. So there's no full-time Chief Casino Officer employed directly by GWC. Is that the position?
As of today, that is actually the position, but that wasn't the historic position.
So, sorry, let's make sure we're not talking at cross purposes. What is the position today in relation to the Chief Casino Officer?
The Chief Casino Officer is at this time appointed Mr. Mark Beecroft, and Mr. Mark Beecroft is only undertaking these duties at this time.
So he works full-time as Chief Casino Officer?
Because of the amount of support needed for the Royal Commission, we determined that it was appropriate he should only undertake those duties.
And what was the position before his appointment?
The position of Chief Casino Officer had been held concurrently with the position of Deputy Director General of the Department of Racing, Gaming and Liquor. When the machinery of government amalgamation took place, then that Deputy Director General became the Deputy Director General of the new department and maintained holding the same concurrent position as Chief Casino Officer.
Now, it was a convention, effectively, was it, that the Chief Casino Officer would be the person who occupied the position of Deputy Director General of the responsible department?
I think that it was prior to my time that this arrangement became place, but I understood that the position of Deputy Director General was advertised and a person appointed with the intent that they should hold the concurrent appointments.
But who actually appoints a person, or used to appoint the person before Mr Beecroft, to the position of Chief Casino Officer?
It's appointed by the Commission.
But as far as you're aware, the Commission had discretion to appoint somebody other than the Deputy Director General, or they were pursuant to some policy or convention to appoint the Deputy Director General?
No, under the Act is clear that the Gaming Wagering Commission approves the appointment of an officer, generally an officer of under the Public Sector Management Act. So it could be someone other than hence when I brought forward Mr Beecroft, he wasn't the Deputy Director General, and the Gaming Wagering Commission accepted my advice that he should be appointed Chief Casino Officer.
Just go to paragraph 34, please. So you described there that the appointment of the Chief Casino Officer was typically linked to the division of the department dealing with casino regulation. And you make mention of the first time the licence was granted, the appointment was made to the person occupying the position of Director, Casino Control Division. And the last sentence, from 2007 to recently, a Deputy Director General of the department has been appointed CCO. Why was it always the Deputy Director General who was appointed CCO?
That was prior to my time, so I
Don't know.
I don't know.
So up until that changed, who determined how much of that person's time was spent performing the duties of the CCO and how much was spent performing their duties as Deputy Director?
The Director General would generally determine the scope of the position and allowing for concurrent appointments. That job description would be submitted to the Public Sector Commission because it's a SES role, State Executive Service position. Public Sector Commission, through the Public Sector Commissioner, then signs off on that job description and then a person's appointed accordingly. In this case, there's the added complexity of the Gaming Wagering Commission approving the person's appointment, but I would have an assumption that on establishment of the Deputy Director General, it was allowed for that they could hold a concurrent appointment. I hold a concurrent appointment as General Manager of the Perth Theatre Trust, along with being Director General of the department. In terms of the question around proportionality of work, the Deputy Director General would have had the line reporting of investigators, of regulators and other staff that were deployed on casino operations, and therefore it provided the line reporting to the Chief Casino Officer on all those reports and compliances, and then they would take that independent of the Director General, who is Chair of the Commission, to the Commission. So essentially, by separating it, the Director General of gaming of what was then racing, gaming and liquor would have had a degree of separation from the Deputy Director's role to oversight compliance and bring those as Chief Casino Officer, which clearly has an intent to have a degree of independence to the Commission and report to the Commission in their own right.
Was there more than one, if you go from when you took over in 2017, was there more than one Deputy Director General of the department?
No.
So, and do we understand that term deputy in the conventional sense? Like if you were away on leave, that person would step into your shoes?
Not strictly. When we created the new department, I appointed the Deputy Director General from RGL as Deputy Director General Regulation and had him oversight the regulatory functions because the department was about half regulatory and half service delivery. And I clearly came from a service delivery background, so I took responsibility effectively as a Director General for full line management of all of the service delivery elements, and the Deputy Director General had oversight of the regulatory elements. If I was on leave, he or an alternative executive director would act in my place pending on availability. But that would have only been for a week at a time and really just to sign off papers.
I might just pursue that now that Commissioner Owen has raised the point. Can we go to document PUB.004.0004.0001, which should be the latest annual report of the department? And if we go to page 0029, thank you. And there's a operational structure of the department. Is it possible to increase that, enlarge that, thank you, of the department as at 30 June 2020, is that right?
At that time, yes.
Has it changed since?
Yes.
In what way?
Well, I sought from the Public Sector Commissioner support to establish a designated Executive Director of Local Government, and that's subsequently been brought about, and that appointment's been made. So those elements that you appear on the right, where I'm looking after some elements of local government investigations, they are now all under a traditional model of local government, a single ED of local government.
Can we zoom out, please, so we can see the document as a whole? And we obviously can see you as Director General sitting there over the top of the department. And then on the left-hand side, that flows into regulatory services on the left. Zoom into that side of the... Thank you. Now, within that column of regulatory services is included regulatory review of the racing, gaming and liquor industries, is it?
Yes, that includes racing, gaming and liquor, and the other parts of local government and all the other acts that we have. You mentioned the Dog Act and Cat Act, and there's a range of legislation all fits under that area.
And if we go to the next page, 0030, there's some interagency relationships. Can you just explain what that's about?
We have a series of entities that are independent of the department that we help service, the Liquor Commission. The Local Government Standards Panel is established under the Local Government Act, and we have external and internal parties forming that panel, and RPAT deals with, under our racing, gaming and liquor area, to do with jockeys and trainers and matters that come forward for potential disciplinary matters there.
With the row of that's in the second box of the regulator row,
Yeah.
is that identifying external agencies that have a relationship with the department?
They're, again, commissions that we support. So Combat Sports Commission, we provide the secretariat for it. Again, it's got departmental officers that support it, and the appropriation comes through the department. Same with the Gaming Wagering Commission, and the same with State Records Commission.
But the designation at the top of the document is Department Interagency Relationships. So how does one ascertain, or can one ascertain from this document or somewhere else in the annual report, the nature of the relationship between department and any particular agency on this sheet?
Well, they're all areas that the department has an administrative oversight of. Each of them comes out of specific pieces of legislation. How they operate, their remit is set down in those statutes. So they could be provided to the Commission.
Right, now if we go to the next page, 0031, please. This is the executive structure. We could just make that a little larger, please. And I think this might go to a question Commissioner Owen asked you. We see the Deputy Director General out there on the left-hand side.
Yes.
The Deputy Director General doesn't have deputy responsibility, if I can put it this way, across the whole department.
No.
A Deputy Director sits coordinate with the other positions that are mentioned alongside him in this chart, him or her.
In terms of reporting to me, this is the direct report. So the Deputy Director General is direct report to me, but they have, of course, all of the regulatory functions under them, where the others are operational divisions of the service delivery side of the agency.
So if we go back to 0029. And we just enlarge that a little, please. It's a little hard to read. Under that heading, Regulatory Services, the Deputy Director General heads up regulatory services and everything underneath it,
Yes.
but nothing else.
No.
So, sorry, if there are regulatory functions within, say, the local government aspect of the portfolio, the Deputy Director General, who is also the Casino Control Officer, I'm talking pre-2021, has no role to play in that?
No, they had oversight of the general regulatory activities in all our divisions, which were essentially those that came from racing, gaming and liquor, those that came from local government, and legislation that came underneath the Local Government Act. And there was one other part of regulation, which was the Combat Sports Commission, which was previously under Sport and Rec, but they didn't have any regulatory experienced staff in that department, so we took advantage of machinery government to give them a bit more support through bringing them under this. But of course there were staff drawn from each of those areas to support the Deputy Director General in the functions of their duties.
Now, when Mr. Connolly was the Chief Casino Officer, he sat at the top of this regulatory services column as Deputy Director General.
Yes.
And where is Mr. Beecroft located, if at all, in this chart?
Mr. Beecroft was a director underneath the regulatory services. In his particular area, you would need to go to a sub-chart of directors to see how the racing, gaming and liquor divisions were established. So they haven't, the structure of RGL per se had not changed from the time we mogged to now, although we're doing a review at this time to see whether there are ways of enhancing the capacity of the area, but so it's structured as it was under the previous arrangement.
What was Mr. Beecroft's title immediately before his appointment as Chief Casino Officer?
I think it was Director of Racing and Wagering Services, something like that.
So he sat within this left-hand column.
Yes, and he headed up one of the divisions as a manager, as a level 8 manager. There were 4 level 8s.
Now that he has been appointed Chief Casino Officer, does he continue to retain that title?
That's his substantive role. But I asked him to act as Chief Casino Officer and recommended that to the Commission, where Mr Connolly stood down. And we've subsequently taken those other responsibilities and the role that he previously had and assigned them to another officer.
Commissioner, I'll tender the department's annual report for 2019. I'll read out the document identifier PUB.004. 00 or 0004? 0004, I beg your pardon. I'll start again. PUB.004.004.001.
The department's annual report for 2019-2020 is admitted into evidence as an exhibit with the document identifier that Ms Cale has just read out.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can I just come back to where I was, talking about the arrangement that preceded your involvement with the GWC, where from 2007 the Deputy Director General was appointed to the position of Chief Casino Officer. From the time that you've assumed the role of Chairperson, have you formed any view about the appropriateness of that arrangement?
Of the past?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, certainly I was, I had previous experience of working with RGL to the extent that I was in Aboriginal Affairs and had contact around liquor harm minimisation issues, and I found it what I call a black letter regulator. They were very, very strong on process and compliance and strictly lettered of the law. I was aware of Barry Sargent's very high standing in the public service. When I took on the role, I was impressed by the Deputy Director General and Chief Casino Officer's extensive knowledge of the legislation of gaming itself. He'd been there for quite some time and, really felt that there was enormous support there for a Gaming Wagering Commission from a quality officer, but well supported by a team of staff in the department, including some very fine directors under him, including Mr Beecroft, who, again, when he attended and briefed on matters of his particular expertise, was also obviously a long-standing and highly experienced and officer that you could rely on, or absolutely could rely on. The thing that impressed me about them was that they always came forward with information at a factual level without colouring those with, opinions. So Gaming Wagering Commission was always brought forward, this is the situation, or this is the fact, or this is the matter before you, and it was never coloured by you should consider doing X and Y. There might be recommendations based on the statutes, but they were recommendations, could be agreed or non-agreed or changed. So I was very impressed, having my experience in government, at the quality of the support that I got, and therefore I was confident that we could continue. And in fact, one of the decisions I made was to make sure that I didn't, in managing the efficiencies and things required of me through the mogging process, to keep the structure and integrity of what was going on intact, as it was a critical risk for the agency that it sustained its operations.
Do you have a view about whether a chief casino officer needs to have prior knowledge and experience of casino regulation in order to adequately equip themselves in that role?
I think that's a very interesting question. There's probably multiple ways of answering it. Yes, I think they have to become experts. That said, the risk would be to simply go and employ someone who's already operating in a casino. You've got a single licence holder in this state and you've got a single regulator. So there is an advantage potentially of having a party that hasn't worked for a casino and ensuring that they are well prepared. So if they have a strong regulatory background from another area of government, then I believe they could take the role on and execute it at a very high level if they, are inculcated into everything that there is about casino operations. And I believe that's the pathway in this case. That Mr Connolly came, I think, from fishing regulation and then was given through Mr Sargent significant exposure to gaming regulatory activities at a national level and became an expert in that.
So if we go back to your witness statement, please, at page 0010, paragraph 38, you mentioned that the Chief Casino Officer is not upon appointment or periodically required to undertake a formal training process, nor is such a process provided. And that is so despite the fact that the appointee might not have any previous experience or knowledge in relation to casino regulation specifically.
Well, I think the approach of most regulatory agencies where you've got such specialisation in government is succession planning and preparing people through taking on, lower level positions and being highly experienced by the time they have been made and appointed to a high level, natural career progression. That can include formal and informal training and education, and would be encouraged, that would be the case. In the case of Mr Connolly, as I said, I understand he was recruited having been a regulator and then undertook intense exposure to the system, and of course Mr Sargent was an expert having been in that role for a considerable period of time
So
as Director General.
Prior, somebody who held the role prior to the recent incumbent shows them how to do the job. On-the-job training is effectively what you're suggesting.
Well, that certainly happens with all levels of regulatory activity in the department. There is a lot of peer support, mentoring, people as they rise and take on more responsibilities. Their work will be audited and tested to see that it was at standard and so on. So,
is it your view that there should be formal training for a person who is appointed to the role of Chief Casino Officer?
well, it's a question of whether there's the appropriate training available and where that would come from. There are international courses now in casino gaming regulation. To have somebody who had undertaken tertiary qualifications at a level would clearly be an advantage going forward, but these things are really emerging with a huge emphasis in technology again. And now I think there's new specialisations that are coming forward in the form of tertiary qualifications. They're not available in Western Australia. It's a small jurisdiction. I'm not even sure they're available anywhere nationally, but they are certainly internationally.
So have you spoken to Mr Beecroft about him obtaining such qualifications?
Well, Mr Beecroft was acting obviously at my request because of the circumstances of Mr Connolly stepping aside. Mr Beecroft is at an age where he might not seek to take on that type of role ongoing. And
Sorry, I'll just interrupt you, forgive me, but just to clarify that on the way through, before you complete your answer. So Mr Beecroft is only holding the role of Chief Casino Officer temporarily, is he?
yes, and until such time as we're aware of the findings of this commission, and then we'll obviously respond accordingly.
Understand. So sorry, I interrupted you. You were saying that he might not be of the age that he would be inclined to take on such a course of study.
Well, that could be correct. He's very experienced in other parts of our regulatory divisions and in areas as a racing specialist, and I think that's we wouldn't necessarily want to lose that specialisation. We might want to bring in a new person, but he's very experienced because he did back up Mr Connolly when he was on leave, so had a long experience of understanding the casino gaming environment and was able to step in. Very much appreciate him doing so.
Do you have a view about whether a Chief Casino Officer should be given and expected to undertake ongoing periodic training during the term of their appointment? Of a formal nature, I mean to say.
Look, I'd certainly be of the view that the Chief Casino Officer should be a standalone position, and that position, it would be appropriate for that position to have a formalised program of training and development built into it, in the same way as, you know, we fund the ongoing development of our legal practitioners and so on. So yes, I'd support that.
And that would be something that could be implemented under the existing regulatory framework, couldn't it? It's just
Yes.
a matter of resourcing it.
Yes.
And is this a view that you've come to recently?
I've come to the view that the development of staff in the public service at all levels is advantaged by opportunities for those staff to access and maintain ongoing training and development, and that is, you know, it's very much encouraged by the Public Sector Commission. We have online learning platforms, and we make that available. I've got 800 plus staff. So we provide a lot of free training opportunities for staff to engage in. We have training budgets, and we fund, you know, quite sophisticated development of staff where they, you know, need technical upgrades, qualifications. And we have a program, of course, of maintaining people that have the need for formal qualifications to retain their currency in those, like CPAs in our finance area and all that. So I would have no, philosophical disagreement that if we identified that the same level of qualifications and they're accessible should apply to specialists within casino regulation, then clearly there is a framework structure and resourcing component that could meet that requirement.
Can I just understand your answer then? If such training were to be made, ongoing training for specific to the role of Chief Casino Officer were to be made available, then your view is that that should be undertaken by the Chief Casino Officer.
Yes.
But you don't have a view about whether that's something that should be proactively implemented.
Yes, I think it should be proactively implemented. The challenge is to find the appropriate training and whether that's available in Australia or internationally. I mean, clearly, we've been spending quite a bit of time in a constrained environment, so with the pandemic, but I would see it would be advantageous to actually see what is available. We may have to source it elsewhere. We'd have to make sure it was consistent with the regulatory environment that our legislation requires, and then implement it, but I could see that being an advantage.
And would you regard this as a responsibility of the department or a responsibility of GWC to arrange and implement an ongoing formal training program for the Chief Casino Officer?
I would see it as a responsibility of the department. I believe our responsibility is to provide to the Gaming Wagering Commission a high-skilled, capable and dedicated staff resource,
including the role of Chief Casino Officer.
particularly the role of Chief Casino Officer.
So you foresee that the Chief Casino Officer will always be appointed from the department?
No, I don't think that I can foresee the future, but while the Chief Casino Officer is appointed as a department officer through the department, as opposed to being either an independent role or there's an independent regulator outside of the department, that while it is there, then yes, I believe that the department would have the responsibility to ensure that person is appropriately skilled for the role.
Right, now, at paragraph 34, which remains on the screen, Mr. Ord, you had described that practice of, from 2007 until recently, of the Deputy Director General of the department being appointed CCO, Chief Casino Officer, and then you state that the practice changed in February 2021 when Mr. Connolly and you agreed he should step aside from that role. Does Mr. Connolly remain the Deputy Director General of the department?
That's his substantive position, yes, but he is not filling that role at this time.
So what role does he fill at this time?
He's doing a special project to do with the implementation of election commitment on a banned drinkers register.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that? I didn't quite hear what you said.
He's undertaking the lead of an election commitment for the implementation of a banned drinkers register across the Kimberley, Goldfields and Pilbara district. So, of course, racing, gaming and liquor includes the liquor regulatory environment. The banned drinkers register is related to the Liquor Act. It's a very significant commitment, and Mr. Connolly is well equipped to lead.
Now, you say that you and Mr. Connolly agreed that he should step aside from the role. Did you involve any other members of GWC in the process of reaching that agreement with Mr. Connolly?
I had a discussion with Mr. Sargent, not about Mr. Connolly stepping aside, but simply the circumstances of the issue that have been raised around Mr. Connolly having previously reported that he had some personal friendships with people who were employed at Crown. I confirmed with Mr. Sargent that he was aware and that they had been noted as in his time as Director General, and then the matter around stepping aside, as I consulted with the Public Sector Commissioner and said that I thought that would be appropriate because I was aware that the meeting of the Gaming Wagering Commission that I would need to chair after the Bergen report had been handed down would require me to lead the Commission in a discussion around the potential of seeking to call an inquiry, and that I believe that the media coverage made it untenable for Mr. Connolly to provide any advice on that matter. So hence I agreed that it needed to be done immediately, and I wasn't in a position at that time to consult with the other members of the Commission.
Why not?
Because we were under intense media scrutiny, and I believed it was appropriate that we could give confidence to the community immediately that he wouldn't be further involved.
You don't think it was appropriate to simply phone the other members of GWC and convene an urgent meeting to discuss the matter?
Look, possibly I could have handled a lot of things better, and yes, I could have potentially called an urgent meeting to discuss the matter, but from my view it was a matter around me as the employing authority of Mr. Connolly, so I took the decision as the employing authority.
You mean the department?
Yes.
Who employs Mr. Connolly in what capacity? capacity, or did, in what
as
capacity?
Deputy Director General and Chief Casino Officer.
So you regarded the department as employing him as the Chief Casino Officer?
On behalf of the Commission, but that his employment was that I, as employing authority, had certain responsibilities related to that employing authority role, so it meant that it would be appropriate for me to take that decision.
Was it the department or the GWC who originally appointed Mr Connolly?
Mr Connolly would have been appointed by the GWC as Chief Casino Officer on recommendation of the department.
And do you know if Mr Connolly tendered any form of resignation or notice of retirement from the position of Chief Casino Officer to the GWC members?
I'm not aware whether he did or didn't. Certainly we made them aware as soon as we could of the situation that Mr Connolly had asked to stand aside and that I had supported that decision.
Now, can you just explain to me, I'm sorry, just so that I'm clear on your evidence, what was your motivation for reaching this agreement with Mr Connolly that he step aside from the role of Chief Casino Officer?
What was my understanding?
What was your motivation to reach that agreement with him?
The media essentially had run a story that Mr Connolly had been fishing with at least one, possibly more, members of the staff of Crown Casino, and that in doing so there was the potential of a conflict of interest in his role. They were obviously fairly strong on their view that there could have been, and as a consequence, Mr Connolly was very distressed, understandably so, and said that he would find it very difficult to continue undertaking his duties while under such duress. I believe that it was appropriate and to accept that, and that in doing so we were wanting to show that we were ensuring the integrity of the Game Wagering Commission decisions beyond that moment of time from any accusation they might have been influenced by.
And when you say we there, who are you referring to?
Well, myself, Mr Connolly, in the case. So we had a discussion around what was in the best interest of the Gaming Wagering Commission, given his personal circumstance and distress, and we agreed that he should step aside.
So you and Mr Connolly had a discussion about what was in the best interests of the GWC without consulting the other members of the GWC?
Yes.
Now, you have mentioned that in his role as he maintains the title of Deputy Director General at the moment, but he doesn't fulfil the duties of that role presently. Is that right?
That's correct.
And did you also enter into an agreement with Mr Connolly that he remove himself from those duties for the time being?
Mr Connolly sought to take leave, and in agreeing to that, I obviously needed to place someone acting in his role while he was on leave. At the conclusion of the leave, or by the conclusion of the leave, I had spoke to the Public Sector Commissioner and sought that he could return, that he should return to work on a project other than matters related to the Gaming and Wagering Commission, because in the meeting immediately after Mr Connolly had stepped down, the Gaming and Wagering Commission considered the Bergen findings and made the determination that they should seek the Minister's support to call an inquiry. And that inquiry should include a review of the department. So as Chair, I essentially sought an inquiry into myself, Mr Connolly, and the whole department, as well as the matters under consideration for Crown.
Now, just coming back to paragraph 34, please. And those last two sentences, speaking first of all about the practice that was in existence from 2007 till recently, Deputy Director General being appointed CCO, you then say that practice changed in February 2021. So is there a new practice or policy relating to the manner of appointment of the Chief Casino Officer?
No, Chief Casino Officer is still appointed by the Gaming and Wagering Commission
But you,
based on the advice from myself.
so you advise the members of the GWC who should be appointed to that role?
Well, I put up a nominee for that role, and they, obviously with the CV and background and so on, and they approved the appointment.
Do you provide a range of, did you provide a number of appointees or just one, suitable candidates or just one?
I only provided one. There is a limited number of senior staff with the experience and ability to undertake that role.
Does Mr Beecroft have prior knowledge or experience of casino regulation?
Yes.
Substantial?
I would argue yes, in that he acted for Mr Connolly on regular occasions over a long period of time, so he's become an experienced operator or experienced regulator across this. His specialisation was more in the racing area than the casino operations because of the division of responsibilities.
So exactly what was the extent of his prior knowledge and experience of casino regulation?
Well, regularly acting as the Chief Casino Officer and being involved as a director in the oversight of various officers who worked on both racing and casino regulation.
How regularly did he stand in the role of acting Chief Casino Officer until his appointment?
He probably attended perhaps every 3 or 4 GWC meetings in one capacity or the other. He did go offline for a period to do work on the TAB sale.
So do you mean every 3rd or 4th meeting he might attend in some capacity, a GWC meeting?
Yes, in my time.
But in relation to casino matters?
Yes, as said, if Mr Connolly wasn't available, he would cover the support of all of the agenda. Other times he may have been there to provide advice on matters of betting. He's an expert on betting contingencies and so on. But he was able to respond well to any matters across the regulatory environment. So he was well equipped across all our legislative requirements.
Before his appointment as Chief Casino Officer, how often did he address the GWC board on matters to do with casino regulation specifically?
I think I'd have to take that on notice and look at the minutes. I couldn't give you an accurate answer just at the moment.
Do you consider that Mr Beecroft has sufficient knowledge, skills and experience in casino regulation to adequately perform his role?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, does the GWC intend, as we're sitting here now, to offer him any introductory or ongoing formal training?
Well, Mr Beecroft is managing the leadership of Supplying Information Royal Commission, and at this stage that's occupying a huge amount of his time, and hopefully the Commission understands we've done our best to provide all information we can in a timely way. Once those duties are over, I'm sure Mr Beecroft, if he's to continue in the role, will come to me and suggest what support he would need to fully execute those duties as a full-time position.
What support is he being provided presently, given his responsibilities in dealing with responding to the Royal Commission?
I've essentially providing unlimited support in that I haven't applied any financial constraint. I haven't been funded to support the Royal Commission.
Sorry, just...
But I've given a direction to make staff available, so...
Sorry, you might misunderstand my question.
Sorry.
Understanding that Mr Beecroft is doing work to basically respond to the Royal Commission, he obviously separately has his primary responsibilities as Chief Casino Officer in respect of casino regulation.
Yes.
What support is he being given in respect of that role of casino regulation while he has these other duties in respect of responding to the Royal Commission?
So we have removed all his other responsibilities apart from doing those two things, which we see as intertwined, providing the leadership around the gathering of information and maintaining the casino oversight of the ongoing business of Crown. So we've removed all other responsibilities to ensure he's got the time, and he has access to full staff resources that were available to the Chief Casino Officer previously. So we've increased staff, some staffing in the area as well to assist.
What have you done in that regard?
I've transferred a senior manager from my office of Director General to the area, and I also sought to bring in a Deputy Director General from Jetsy, who Fiona Roche, who came in and is now primarily working in the area of regulation.
What's her role?
Well, she's effectively acting as a Deputy Director General Regulation for me, focused on this racing, gaming and liquor area.
Can I ask you about casino inspectors? Now, paragraph 39 of your witness statement you say government inspectors are no longer dedicated casino inspectors. When, to your knowledge, were they last dedicated casino inspectors?
I believe that change might have happened around 2015, something like that.
And
prior to my time, that's why I'm not fully familiar with the date.
that's your, as far as you're aware, you would say
As far as I'm
around
aware.
2015. All right. Now, the other roles that these casino inspectors that you have now involve or include inspector roles in relation to racing, other gaming and liquor matters. Is that right?
Yes.
And much of the training is on the job, as you explain at paragraph 39.
Yes.
And then at paragraph 40, you talk about not all training being on the job and inspectors being required to participate in group training sessions. Are you talking about group training sessions specifically in relation to casino regulation and nothing else?
Yes.
And these group training sessions, who conducts them?
I'm personally not aware of who. I could find that information out for you.
Is it someone from within the department?
And experts in regulation. We access quite a few firms who assist in the audit and regulation of machines and so on. So they have a lot of information around how to read the output of their audits and so on, and they're part of it as well.
And so who are these experts?
Well, they're companies that do casino gaming regulation audits.
I see. And are they local firms or
Well, it's specialised business. They tend to be national firms, some with international businesses in this space.
So is it either someone from the department or one of these external consultants, expert consultants, or both that conduct the training sessions?
Yes, I understand it to be a combination.
Is anyone from Perth Casino involved in the training sessions?
I couldn't, I'm not aware. I'd have to find that out.
In terms of the casino inspectors otherwise, and other staff of the department that service the GWC, do the members of GWC themselves conduct any performance reviews of the department staff in relation to the GWC?
Well, all staff have a performance program that they are part of is a departmental framework. So managers, obviously, who are line managers, would undertake annualised performance assessment. In the case of these regulators, there's a strong kind of audit of the quality of work that is done by more senior staff, either senior inspector or a director, or Mr Connolly himself, in the case of his oversight of casino operations. And if there's any concerns on work performance, then they would be taken up. And if there's a gap in training, obviously training applied, and so on. So it was a very much an active space of where staff were, knew they were under constant supervision around the quality of the work they were undertaking.
So what I'm interested to know, Mr Ord, is whether GWC, as opposed to the department, conducts any performance reviews of department staff in respect of the work they perform for GWC.
Not the GWC itself, and it's aware that these things go on, reported by the Chief Casino Officer, that they're actually happening, but GWC doesn't, in its own right, undertake its own performance reviews.
Do the members of GWC have any influence over which department staff are allocated to GWC work and which are not?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Do the members of GWC have any power to discipline or dismiss a departmental officer for good cause?
I believe the legislation probably gives them the power to seek to investigate an officer if they believe there was wrong. And certainly through my office, through the chair and through the department, to bring forward, the usual process under the Public Sector Management Act. They are public sector employees, in which case they would be dealt with through the Public Sector Management Act.
So who has the hiring and firing decision?
Well, the department hires and fires on behalf of the GWC through the Public Sector Management Act.
And in the 4 years that you've been chairperson, has any GWC member come to you and suggested that anybody, a particular person, be hired or fired to do GWC work?
No.
Or should I say in respect of GWC work?
Yeah, no.
Coming back to your role as chairperson of GWC, before the Bergen inquiry commenced, about what percentage of your work time did you spend on GWC matters on average?
Well, it was cyclical because of the meeting schedule of meetings. So when there was a GWC meeting coming up, apart from my regular meetings with Mr Connolly, and in that we discussed the actual work program of the GWC, whether we're on track to deliver on, against reporting timeframes on the GWC, whether matters had come up in the media or whether Crown had been in touch with us over a particular issue. We'd have those discussions. If I needed briefing on a particular matter ahead of the meeting, I'd get my briefings in place. Then, of course, I prepared for the meetings through reading the agenda and then going into the meetings. So in terms of, hours per month, it would vary according to the load. Probably, somewhere around the 10 to 20 hours a month would be regular, just sole focus on that aspect of my job.
And was it the case, and we're talking pre-Bergen, the pre-Bergen period, for that inquiry, that about half of those 10 to 20 hours were involved with casino-specific work?
Pre-Bergen? Well, probably a bit more, because the casino was a more complex matter than others around community gaming and so on. Those matters generally Mr Connolly and I could deal with, that they were progressing satisfactorily just through the course of our normal business. Casino always raised much more strategic issues.
All right, now if we come to paragraph 123 of your witness statement at 0036. Paragraph 123. Now, I think you may have already answered this question along the way, but it might benefit to have it articulated clearly here. You describe at the beginning of this paragraph the Racing, Gaming and Liquor Regulation Unit within the department. So that's the unit that involves or includes casino regulation.
Yes.
And that sits in that left-hand column in the organisational chart we saw, which
Yes.
was under the regulatory services. Is that right?
That's right.
And do the officers within the Racing, Gaming and Liquor Regulation Unit work across all areas of racing, gaming and liquor, or do they have specific responsibilities? One for racing, one for liquor, one for casinos? How does it work?
Yes, there's approximately 75 staff in the total unit, and of those, approximately 33 have a significant amount of their workload on casino regulation, but not exclusive.
So, as things presently stand, Mr. Beecroft is the only person who works exclusively on casino regulation?
We do have the Secretariat supporting, which I've mentioned earlier, and they would work exclusively on, well, not exclusively on casino because they put the whole of the agenda together, but support exclusion of the Gaming Wagering Commission.
Yes. And before Mr. Beecroft, nobody within the Racing, Gaming and Liquor Regulation Unit worked exclusively in respect of casino regulation.
That's correct.
I think that's 1 o'clock.
Just before we break, we've had a request from the media for a copy of Mr. Ward's statement. We are minded to grant that request, but only the statement and not the accompanying documents. Does anyone take a different view? All right, we'll proceed on that basis and we'll resume at 2 p.m. Thank you.
I understand we now have the statement.
You have the statement?
We have this.